Okay, time for some man time. In the 1980s, the mid 1980s to late 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, could have been earlier, there was an organization called the Guardian Angels that used to go around all the different communities, and they were posing as like a neighborhood watch. A lot of these people were people who lived in better communities, and they were trying to come to the lower income communities and help it to be more safer for the children. They would volunteer to sit and talk with the children. They would try to stop crime from happening in these communities. They would give warnings to the drug dealers and the riffraff that were gambling and shooting dice in the communities because it was bringing so much violence and fights and shootings in a lot of these communities. They would, warn the drug dealers that they would call the police if they didn't move off of certain corners with the drugs or they didn't stop selling drugs in these communities. And you know who ran them out of the communities? The mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunts, and girlfriends of the drug dealers. Yeah. Not the men, not the fathers, but the mothers, grandmothers, aunts, sisters, cousins, and girlfriends of the young teenage or the young adolescent males who were doing all of the nonsense. Make it make sense. These people were volunteering their time, not necessarily getting paid always, if at all. It was a private organization, at first at least. I don't know what happened later, but what I do know and what I did see with my own eyes is that these people were ran out of these communities. They used to also come by and help cut the grass and help if your mom or your grandmother or the women in these housing communities or projects or low income communities were doing gardening in the front yard. They would help. They would come by in their khakis and berets and they'd help do everything in these communities. They talked to the kids. They would recommend certain things and volunteer to do classes, etc., etc., etc. And the mothers, grandmothers, aunts, sisters, cousins, girlfriends, and wives ran them away. So the people who were trying to make the communities better were run off by the people who were trying to keep it worse. And just so happens, it wasn't the males, it was the females. And then when the females kicked into gear, the dudes who wanted to keep doing what they were doing would pretend to support the females because the females were working on their behalf. This is why when you go to low-income housing areas or the projects, they look really, really, really run down. I'll give you an example. If you go to New York, you go to Philadelphia, you go to Jersey, you go to Miami, you go to Baltimore, you go to any one of these cities where the crime is heavy and it's run down, it's going to be full of majority women. Single women or women with boyfriends, which means they're still single, technically on paper, because they have boyfriends and not husbands on paper. Yeah, you're going to see pissy hallways, which means it's their sons pissing in the hallway. It's their sons and nephews and grandsons and boyfriends pissing in the elevators. Drinking from soda cans or beer cans and throwing them shits on the ground. Breaking bottles on the ground. Yeah. But they'll make it seem as if because the neighborhood is run down, that the white folks should come in and clean it up. Not that their sons, grandsons, nephews, brothers, boyfriends, husbands, the people who are doing it shouldn't clean it up. They shouldn't clean it up for them since they defend them. Nope. Somebody else who doesn't do it should come and clean it up. Yeah. Yeah. These are the people who were the daughters who went against their fathers and mothers' permission. They rebelled and dealt with that boy anyway. And when they took that rebellion to the boy, the boy would actually respond in the way that the parent should have responded, the way the father and mother should have responded. And when the boy responds that way, because the father and mother didn't respond that way like they should have, they blame the boy instead of the rebellious daughter who disobeyed them. Yeah, this is a culture. We fault the victims as the perpetrators and the perpetrators as the victim. Yeah, we're calling evil good and good evil. Our brains are in backwards, or at least being operated as such. You see, I remember my grandmother hiding me and my cousin and my uncles when the police would come knock on the door. Yeah, yeah. I remember my mother fucking off and ruining people's lives, including mine. And my grandmother would go against even her husband, my grandfather, to protect and defend her daughter that was fucking everybody's life up. So it didn't just happen with people outside the house, it happened with people inside the house. The fuck ups get the attention, and the people who do right, the ones in the house that do right, they get neglected. Yeah, this is a common thing. It's a culture. We don't teach our children to read. We send them to school to a stranger. And we think the stranger is supposed to be responsible to teach our children. Not to enforce what we already do at home. Nope. You start it and you finish it. Translation, I don't even really want to have to do homework with them, so I'll get them a tutor. So you'll get them a teacher, a tutor, and someone to help them study. And you don't see it as neglect. When what your children are essentially supposed to be learning is who they are. And that starts at home. I know. We don't realize that all this carnage that we teach is culture. In fact, do you know the opposite of entitlement is generosity, or a form of generosity? I could tell you some words, but I won't. It is a form of generosity, though. So the opposite of generosity is stingy, greedy. Yeah. So when you teach chicks that they're supposed to be able to receive assistance from the child's father because they have a child, from the government because they have a child, and that society is supposed to overlook all of their ills because they have a child, what you're doing is teaching little girls to actually rush and grow up to become mothers, which means you're teaching them to pass over becoming women and wives because they want authority and control without responsibility. That's an evil nature, isn't it? And this is what we have learned to teach the devils because we support the devils over the guardian angels. What do I know? I'm only a guardian angel that was once a devil who too rebelled against my guardian angels. Anywho, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and let's get the conversation started. I'd like to know if you're the devil or the guardian angel, and where do you stand on your past? You know, either the culture that you left or the culture that you're in. And until next time, man, time out.